Okay, hi. We're going to try to do a tutorial today on how to bring Rosebud into Roblox. The idea being to get a terrain off of Google satellite maps using Blender and then bringing it into Roblox, sizing it properly, and then being able to populate it. And there'll be some glitches along the way, but let's see what we can do here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Blender and I'm going to make a new file, because this was a windmill that I was working on, an animation for spinning the windmill, and yeah, that was a different project. So let me open up a new file, and sometimes it takes a second to get going. Well, maybe I will just try Control N, see if that does it. Oh, it says new file. What kind do you want? It'll be a general file. And so I'm going to save this one. So this is how Blender opens up. It's got the default cube in there. They're in these new things called collections, and I'm going to make a new collection, and I'm going to call this the Rosebud map, whatever terrain map you're doing. And that way I can turn off this collection so I don't have these assets in there. I'm just focused on the Rosebud map collection, and I'm going to hit the 7 key. Before I do that, let me turn on my screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing. That's supposed to work. Huh. There we go. Needed to be refreshed, I guess. And let me hit the N key to get rid of that. The N key brings up the Properties tab. Anyway, you can see down here what I'm doing. That may help you. I'm going to hit the number pad 7 key, and the 5 would be perspective. If I hit it again, it's in orthographic. You want to be in top orthographic. Then what I'm going to do is I have my plugin for GIS, so I'm going to go to make sure that my folder that is set is one that I can access, and this one I've set to my GIS files, Blender GIS cache folder there. So create a folder in there, that's important. Go to Web Geodata, get a base map. I'm going to use Google Satellite. You have Satellite or Map. You have Google OSM, which is OpenStreetMap, Bing, or OSMWS. I'm going to use Google Satellite, and I'm going to click on the OK there. And that always seems to not... Oh, it crashed Blender. Well, that's not good. Let's try this again. Starting with a new file. I'm going to repeat that. So I will call this my Rosebud map, and I'm going to turn off the collection, that collection, or make a new collection of it. So bring in the scene collection. Okay, turn off that collection. Let's try this again with the screencast keys. Maybe they will work, maybe they won't. There we go. So I'm going to hit 7, and it is already orthographic, so that's fine. I'm going to go to GIS, and I'm going to go to my web, and there's my map, and I'm going to hit G, and that hits for go to, and I'm going to say Rosebud Continuum in Land O'Lakes, and let's see if Google gets it at that name. Bring it up to about 19 or 20, say OK, and there it is. Okay, so we have Rosebud right there. And once we have the extent that we want, and this is a pretty good one here, bring it over, then you hit E for export, and we get that. It's cloudy for some reason, still haven't figured out why that is. And then what we do, having this map, is we now download the satellite's topographical map, which gives us some depth information. It's a digital elevation map. You can see that the lake is actually a depression in there as the satellites take it. So we've got that information in there, and we're going to also get some OpenStreetMap information. We're going to try to get the buildings, and we will set the height. We'll bring it down. I've just found that that is more realistic, and I'm not sure what numbers to use, so I'll just say I'll put 5 in here, and hope that's okay, and get the elevation from the object, which is the elevation object is that map. And then we're going to make separate objects, and say OK. And what it's doing is it's pulling in what Google Satellite thinks are buildings, and there they are. There's the house, the Bishop House, and there's the school. And you'll see they lay on there. So that gives us some reference points, which is good. Another thing we are going to do is we're going to, actually let me save this as, and it's in Roblox, and this will be saved as Rosebud map with buildings, and save that. Now there's other things that we want to be able to bring into Roblox. One, of course, is the lake, and one way to bring the lake in is to go to paths, and paths would be in add and mesh, not a mesh, curve, and add a path. And that path appears here as this little dot. I'm going to hit the G key and move it over to the side of the lake. And I also want to curve over and see the path is way underneath for some reason. But that's because the entire mesh is not at 0. So let me deselect holding the Shift key, deselect my path. And let me go to the number 1 view and hit G and Z and just bring everything down to the red line. So the lake, of course, you can see the lake is below, down here is the lake. And that way, when I now select the path, which is this little fella here, it should be visible. You can hit the number pad 0 key to find an object, but maybe what we'll need to do in this case is to, having selected the path, which is the path here, there's the NURBS path, there it is, going to a side view, let's bring the path hitting GZ, bring it up a little bit, and then, because there is some contour to this, and then it's above the lake a bit. That makes it easier. We can bring it down after we've drawn the path, but this way we can make our path. And you see, if you then hit the Tab key to go into Edit, there's a part of the path, and there's something wrong with the clipping here because it really isn't showing up. I'm going to raise it up again, GZ. Oh no, I should have done that. Let's go back to the side view, and I'm going to bring this in object mode, so hit Tab to go back to object mode, and bring this up higher, because it keeps disappearing when we come over here. There's some clipping issues. GZ, and bring it up even higher. There it is over the landscape. And now when I zoom in, I can see it a little bit better, and I hit Tab to edit. And you can see that there's little arrows here, but they're pointing the wrong direction. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to rotate it so that the arrows are sort of facing where the lake goes. There we go. And I want to select one end of it, and I want to hit Extrude and start making a basic path around the lake. So I extrude my path around the lake, and I'm not going to do I'm not too worried about it being perfect. I just want to get the basic idea of where the lake is for placement purposes. And bring those together, and then I'm going to select this point and shift select this point, and I'm going to hit F to join them, and so I should now have a path for the lake. And I go into now object mode and go to object, and I say that I want to convert a mesh out of it. So now this should be a mesh, and if I click on tab again, you see all the points in there that make this into a mesh. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this point and this point here, and I'm going to hit F to make a face, and then I should be able to select that line, and something's not working now. Alright, so that wasn't ideal. So let me go back into tab. Oops, let me do that. Let me select this again and go to tab and go back to points. And what if I select this point, this point, this point, this point, this point, and this point, and then hit F? That gives me a triangle. Now I go back to the edge and I click on one of those edges, and I'm not doing it. So I guess another thing I can do is just take the circle key and select these faces here. Actually, I need to get rid of, let me hit Control Z here. Oops. Let's do it again. Let me grab these points here, and then let me hit F to get the face. And let's see if I now select just this edge. That created a face, but this does not create a face. Select that edge and hit a face. Okay, so I'm selecting now and hitting F and filling this lake with faces by hitting the F key over and over. For some reason you can't see that. Now you can. Okay, let's do that again. There we go. So filling in the lake by hitting F over and over and over and over. And there seems to be a face here that needs to be selected. Alright, so I do have now an object that is fully faced. And when I go to, except for that part there, that's a little queer, isn't it? There's some crossover in the face over here. That's a bit of a mess. So what can we do here? Maybe we have to shift select and hit F on that. Well, for whatever it's worth, we have a basic lake there, and it's got a lot of different faces in there. So when I go into object mode, that is our lake, and we want to actually make it a bit thicker. So what we're going to do is we're going to scale it in Z. No, that doesn't work. That center point, that right click on that and say set origin to geometry, and it moves it somewhere toward the middle. We can certainly scale it up and down, but we can't scale it in the Z axis. So we're going to go tab it again, and we're going to select the whole thing, and we're going to go extrude in Z and give it just a tiny bit of depth. So let me zoom in on it to do that. So I'm going to again hit E for extrude, Z for the direction I'm going to extrude, and I'm just going to make a tiny bit just to give it some depth. There we go. That makes an object out of it. And now hit tab. And so we have this lake object, which now I'm going to hit G and Z and move it down to where it belongs in the landscape. So I've got the buildings and I've got the lake. And I'm going to hit save. Now I also want to get some reference points for Roblox of where the where the playing fields are. So again, top orthographic, I'm going to, I can basically do the same thing with the path, but it's easier to add a plane, and that plane, move it up in G so you can see it. Grab GZ, move it up in Z. Bring it down here. Whoops. Where did it go? It's there. I think again it's somewhere too low. So there's the plane there, and move it G, move it up in Z. It's not going anywhere. But it is there. Let me scale it up. That just makes it easier to see. And let me rotate it slightly, hitting the R key, and move it, and then it just keeps disappearing on me. Isn't that interesting? It only shows up when I'm in this aspect. Part of it might be its location in Z. So maybe I need to bring it down to 0. There it is. And now bring it up slightly. There, it begins to show up. Okay. So there it is there, and now, yeah, that's just sitting a bit high on the landscape. Because of these undulations, because we used the digital elevation map with that SRTM, we get that. So I'll bring it down to the ground as effectively as I can. GZ, and bring it down there, so it just shows up. And then hit the period key to find it, and now go to the over above. All right, now I can go in and I can edit this, and I can take click off it to deselect it. As it's a plane, I can select this point. Let me go to the points here. Select this point, and hit extrude. And I can constrain it if I want to construde in Y, but I already rotated it, so that's kind of awkward. So I'm just going to extrude it by hand and bring it up to about here. Or I can just hit G. That would have already been extruded. All right. One other thing is I can now select these 2 points, and rather than hitting extrude, which creates a line and separates objects, I'll just use G and I'll just drag it to extrude it. I should have done that to begin with. And in fact, I probably can delete this point. No, can't do that. Well, I'll delete all these points. And now I'll do this again. I'll use my bounding box, grab these 2, and just hit G. Oops, still got an extra point there. There's more than one point. So, what happens if I delete that? Okay, there should be now a vertex there and a vertex there. And then hit G, and yeah, drag it up that way. Now grab this one, and bring them with G over and out. Grab this point with the left mouse button, click it there. Shift click this one here and drag it out with G out to there. And the whole thing I can move, and that is our basic volleyball field. And then I can duplicate it with Shift D and move another one onto the basketball court, because they're about the same size. What I'll have to do with both of these now is I'm going to have to give them a little bit of depth. So I'm going to hit extrude in Z, and there's this weird clipping problem, and I'm not sure. Hold on, I'm going to pause here, deal with that. Okay, so as far as I know, you have to do it with each object. But what you do is you went off again. There we go. You use the properties menu, and you go to view, and you change the clipping, which doesn't seem to be available for here, because I'm selecting this one particular object. So let me now get out of this into object, and now there's the clip start. Okay, so the clip start was way too small. So I want to really bring that down to like 0.1. You can bring it even further down, whatever number of meters, but 0.01 will be probably good for us here. And then the end clipping, as I zoom out, see how it disappeared there? That needs to be made much bigger so we can get way out on this, although it seems to have a certain limit. What if I make it, instead of 5,543 meters, what if I make it 10,000 meters? There you go. Now the whole thing can be viewed from a distance before it disappears. So that was the issue, was clipping. And now that the clipping is changed, we're okay to see the object when we zoom in on it. Okay, so another thing that I can do then, I was saying I'm going to take these and I'm going to go into Edit, and I'm going to extrude this in Z and give it just a little bit of height. And that's maybe too much height. So bring it down with the G key. And do the same thing, select this one. Oh, it looks like they're both the same. And stop selecting that, select these because they're duplicate objects, and do the extrusion in Z here and just do a slight rise there. That gives me those two objects on the ground. The other thing I can do, maybe I just shift duplicate these. Ooh, they're one object. That's fine. I don't mean bringing them as one object, but so I can do the same thing with this. And if I find out when I click on these in the object menu in these planes, and I'll call them basketball and volleyball courts. All right. When I look at the basketball and volleyball courts and I hit the N key to see them, I see that they are now at Z. Their location ain't changing at all. So here, it's in here actually. There we go. So they are at 5 meters. If I put them at 1 meter, they kind of disappear. If I start inching their way back up, then eventually they'll come above the landscape here. So the landscape is higher than the 0 in the z-axis, and they begin to emerge at about 5 meters. So that's about where this should be too. So when I come in and I add a new plane here, and I go to Add Mesh Plane, I can put one here. Another thing you can do to add a 3D object itself is you can go into a cube and add that cube. Where that cube went, there it is over there. Put that cube in Z at 5 meters so it comes up. Bring it down to here, but flatten it out so that that cube, when I hit, you can now do, without going into edit mode, you can stay in object mode and you can hit G to move it, and then hit scale in Z and flatten it way down and sort of create a plane that way, and then move it down here, and at this point for this beehive area I can either scale it out like this, but now it's become a bit too big, and then scale it down further in Z to get it nice and flat. That gives a reasonable approximation for where the beehives are going to be. It needs to be rotated just slightly. So I'm marking that. Now, the other thing I want to do is know where to place the RV when we put it in. And the RV in reality is down in here somewhere. So what I'll do now for that, that's the RV under here it appears, is I will add a marker for the RV, and I think the thing to do would be to take this cube and duplicate it and bring it up there, and I'm going to call this cube RV. The other cube would have been the beehive. It doesn't matter if my spelling is bad, does it? But the RV now, I can scale it in Y and make it a bit longer, so it's a kind of pad for the RV, and it looks like it's a little bit high. I'm going to put that at 5. Yeah, the landscape is a bit lower there, so bring it up a bit. There we go. So now we have a location for that, and another location that we want to be able to create is for the biodigesters, of course. And there they are here. So here I'm going to add a cylinder. Let's see, it's way up there. Bring that cylinder down. It's going to also have to be at a Z location of 5, so it shows up. And scale the cylinder to about what the size of the digester is. There are more precise ways to do this, of course. Get the second digester in, and get the third digester in. And there you go. We'll call this one Dragon digester, and this one will be the Wishing Well digester, and this one will be the Buried digester. Alright, so that gives us the digester locations, and we can position everything else kind of by site. The only other thing we probably want to do is get ourselves the greenhouse. And so once again we can add a mesh, and we can, I think I'll go with the plane again in this case, and make this plane the greenhouse, and move it down to here, move it up in Z to 5.5 meters, so it shows up. Now go into edit mode and select these two, hit G and stretch it out to here, select off it, select these two, hit G and stretch it out to the end of the greenhouse here. Now select off it, select these two, and stretch it out to the greenhouse there, and do the same thing here. And I note that I've actually made it a bit small, so do it again. There's that, and bring it down to there. So I've got a place for the greenhouse in there. Once again, it helps to select the whole thing and do an extrude in Z and give ourselves a little bit of dimension. I'm not modeling these right now, I'm just getting something for Roblox that will be positional. And this should be moved down a bit onto the landscape. This should be moved down. And this digester is actually buried. This one's half buried. And we haven't modeled the digesters yet, but we now have some idea of what the layout of the landscape is. And with that layout, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to export these out for Roblox, but Problem is they're way too tiny, and I can show you that by bringing in some Roblox characters that I have that I exported from Roblox. So if I go to this object file and I bring in from Roblox, I have a character and a car that I had, and I bring these guys in and move them around, you can see that relative, there's the truck. So relative to the real car from the satellite image that's sitting here, when I move this up in on top of it, it's way too big, as you can see. So that doesn't work at all, right? And that's because stuff that's brought in from Google Maps satellite is 4 times smaller than what Roblox has. So if I want to make everything bigger, then actually let me turn these off so they don't get selected, the character and the car. I want to select everything. Actually, that won't work. I've got to do everything piece by piece. So I'm going to select the landscape first, and I'm going to scale it. This is the export Google satellite map. I'm going to scale it 4 times in X, Y, and Z. And that makes it huge. But as you'll see when I turn on the characters, wherever they are, character and car, so when I turn them on now and I move them, oops, I want to move that, I want to zoom in on them. Where are they? Character. Okay, select those and zoom into those. Of course, everything needs to be moved down again because now the car is way down there and this massive landscape is up here. So I'm going to bring this down in Z to 0 meters again. And now it's a bit still too high. So let me go to my one view and do what we did before. Hit G and Z and just bring the whole landscape down. And maybe even lower. There we go, you can see the car. Okay, so now when you look at the car, if I bring the car, character and car selected, and bring it down, it matches. Look at that. That car matches that car almost. It's still way too low, so I'm going to bring it up in Z. Put the wheels over it. But now when we look at the top view, there it is. It's matching up pretty well. So it is actually on the landscape properly. And that means we need to do the same for example, the lake. So if we take the lake and we go to scale and we go 4 and 4 and 4, then the lake fits. And then I have to come over and move the lake into position again. The same thing would be true of these. So this building needs to be scaled up 4, 4, and 4. And then it needs to be, oops, I moved the lake when I shouldn't have. So just that. That needs to be moved over the house. And now the house fits. And if I bring this down here, this is going to have the same thing happen, the same manipulation. 4, 4, and 4. And now that, oops, goes over the classroom. And we have to do that actually for each of our objects. We have to do that. We've got to scale them up 4 times what we made them at. And then we need to move them into the proper position. We'll do more fine-tuning in a moment. The buried digestion. Let's go to the basketball courts for a second. Scale it. Scale it. Oops. Scale it. And then, did it scale? Did not scale. Something happened there. Basketball cards and volleyball cards. Needs to be scaled up. Well, then we multiply it by 4, 16, and 16 and 16. So now they're okay. They're not perfect. They need to be brought up a little bit in Z. Let's do that. And then move them over. And we'll do the same for the greenhouse, which is now 4, 4, 4, and bring that greenhouse down into position. So it's a painstaking thing, but has to be done. Right? There's the RV pad, and that should be done scaled in 4, 4, and 4. That didn't work. Should have been whatever that was multiplied by 4 actually. So that's the problem. So this is about 16 because that's 4 times that. This was a -8, so it's going to be 32. And this one here should roughly be 0.4. So that's about where the RV goes. And it goes up in the tree line about here. And the last things that we'll do, the wishing well digester is there. That needs to be scaled up. Or is that one already there? That one's already scaled. That's the wishing well, that goes there. We need to put in the buried digester, which got lost way up here. We can bring it there and scale it up. Part of the problem is that I did some scaling of it before I actually moved stuff around. I probably should have scaled everything up to 4 right at the get-go before doing any manipulations. But there's the dragon digester, and we'll make that, scale that up. Okay, and they need to be brought down on the landscape. Everything's way too high now, so when you go to your side view, you can select objects and bring them down. And then we'll have to do some fine-tuning later. Because they're not quite on the ground. And of course this digester is buried, this one is half buried, and this one is not buried. So there is some monkeying around to be done. That should be done from the top view to line them up. Bring that down in the landscape, bring that down in the landscape. There we go. This should not be floating there. It should come down to the landscape till just where it touches. Oops. This one, bring them down to about where they touch the landscape. All right. So this gives us some reference points, and I'm going to save this. I'm now going to turn off the character and the car, and I'm going to pick each individual object, and I'm going to export it. Maybe I should put a texture or color on it, if it'll allow me. I'm going to put a base color and make the water blue if it'll let me. It's not showing up. There is a color there, color for metal. Material, for some reason, this is not giving me any color information, and I'm not sure why. Maybe if I click on here, if I look at rendered, yeah, it's blue. All right. Should show up there as blue, but it didn't. If we look at the material, there we go, and you see it better. And then I'm going to make the house, that rendering thing gets pretty messy. Give the house a color and call it a yellowish color, and the same thing with the classroom. Yellowish color. I'll leave the others as gray, but I'm going to click on the Blender's just acting funny. It's not letting me select anything. Let's hit save. And let's go to our top view. Well, something's crazy here because it won't let me select anything. Sometimes when that happens, you've got to just reload the saved file. And nothing here. Maybe because I have that on. No, not letting me select. Strange as fiction. Something went wrong. Raster material on that. It's just not letting me select anything. Alright, I'm going to quit Blender. Save my changes. Okay, I learned something just now. By clicking on this, I had turned off the ability to see the guides. And that was what it was. That was just empty. That thing right there. So, hey, you learn something new every day. Let me make sure my screencast keys go back on. They always seem to go off. But yeah, you've got to have that on so you can see the grid. And for some reason, while I was playing around with that, this went way low, and so I'm going to bring it up underneath onto the landscape. Right, alright, so ain't that crazy. That has to do with the clipping I was talking about, which is under in view up here with the clipping, and you really do need to have it at 10,000. There you go. So a good review of that. Anyway, to get back to what we were talking about, I'm going to take the lake and I am going to export the lake as an object, as a wavefront object. And it's going to be exports to Roblox, and I'm going to call this Lake Rosebud number 2, because I've done this before, and export it into my folder. I'm going to select I'll put these as 1 because they're part of the same building, and I will do export object. Make sure so I'm going to have to redo the lake. Sorry. Let's go back to the lake. When you're doing this, and you're doing an export as a wavefront object, make sure you do selection only, because that's what we want. And I'll export over that now. Now I'm going to select the house and the classroom, and I'm going to export the wavefront object and call it house and classroom. I should tell it that it's at Rosebud, so I'll say Rosebud house and classroom 2, because these are my second attempts to do this. And then I'm going to come over here and do the basketball as one object, save it, export as a different object, make sure it's selection only, and call this basketball and volley Rosebud 2. And I'm going to take the RV pad and export that. RV location is really what it is. Rosebud 2. It'll become clear why I'm doing all this later. and I want to select the greenhouse. It seems to be a little bit low, so let me bring it up a bit. There we go. And export that as greenhouse Rosebud 2. And I want my digesters, which are somewhere around here. And they're not showing up very well, but I'll have all three of them if I can find the other one. Actually, I can find it from here. The dragon digester, the wishing well, and there's the buried digester, which is there. All right, so they are a bit low. So I'm going to bring them up. Oh, not them, not them. Not that. Click off of that. Nope. Let's go ahead and get it from here. Buried digester, dragon digester, and wishing well digester. And move them up in the landscape like so. This guy has to be a little bit higher in Z because he's above the ground. Alright, so I'm going to do them all as a piece. Boom, 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 not you. Boom. Let's do it from here. There we go. And are they in line? Yeah, they're okay. So that's going to be exported as Pusheen digesters Rosebud 2. All right, now that that is exported, I have those objects at the right size to go along with this little Roblox car if it were driving on the landscape. So what I do now is I open up Roblox, and I'm going to find Roblox, and I'm going to go to one of my games, Sustainability Center, but I'm going to write over it somehow, or maybe I'll just create a new game for you. I'll create a new game, although I did start to work on it here. So if I edit this one, you'll be able to see that my last attempt in Roblox Studio was a big mess. So I made this massive terrain. There we go. And it's not going to be big enough for sure. And if I bring in the actual Rosebud, I would go in and I would create a mesh part for each of those parts that I created. But I do want to make this bigger. So it seems what we can do to make this a bit bigger is go to regions in your terrain editor and create a region. I'm going to try to make it as big as possible. Let's see how big we can make it. I don't think it lets me. There's no place to actually write in the values, which is a shame, but if I'm moving stuff, I also need to get it down by there. But let's see just how big we can make this terrain. I think that's as big as I can do it with the region. And then I can go to fill that region with grass and say OK. And then move that region and try to get it to be close to the other terrain region that's in there. So that seems to match there, and that matches there a little bit. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. We have to center that and look down upon it. But at least then we have that ability, and to resize it, I guess that's as big as that region will go. And then that's in there now, and do the same thing again. And although maybe, no, it only gave me that one region. Doesn't seem to give me the ability. Ah, yes, I can create another region out here. I guess I was able to make that one even bigger for some reason. Wow. So I'm making a huge region now. The more the better. It's way over here now. Oh, what a mess. All right. Certainly don't want it to be big that way. I want it to be big this way and this way. And it's giving me some problems. All right, well, let's move that region down and over. So playing with regions is really kludgy right now as far as I'm concerned in terms of Roblox. I'm going to make it really thin and try to move it over and then fill it again with grass and say okay. So each of these is weird, and that doesn't look like it played out well at all. So yeah, there's big problems there, but the point that I was going to make is at some point when we figure this out, we need to put our objects onto there, and what we do for that, and that is the main point of this frustrating exercise, what we do from there, and that's the single terrain. Terrain's a really weird thing, but we come to a piece of terrain and we go insert a mesh part, and that's going to be the object, like the lake. Hit F to get in there, and you then go, once you've got your mesh part, and you click on Mesh ID, and we have these exports to Roblox that we created, and the first one we'll put is Lake Rosebud 2. That's their lake right there. Say open. It says, would you like to resize it? And the answer is no. It has location data. Do you want to move it to the location? Say yes. And nothing happened. And that usually is because the game has not been made public and accepted. So actually it is public. All right, that's weird. Let's see if we publish to Roblox and then try it again. Lake Rosebud. Oh, it's giving us problems. Is there anything else we can bring in here? All right, some of the other parts are coming in, and you can see they're not quite where they should be on the mesh. But what you do is you just keep adding mesh parts, and that will disappear once you have something called mesh part here. So I'm going to call this basketball and volleyball, and now hopefully it will let me insert another mesh part. There you go. And then that mesh part here, I will select something from here. I'll put the digesters. There they are. I will hit open. I do not want to resize the mesh. I do want it to go to the location, and it should be in the location. And there they are, where they're supposed to be. And I will call that mesh part digesters. And it's clear that the terrain is really messed up right now. But I'll add another mesh part in here, and this mesh part I will click on, and I will try to get in at this point the RV location, and don't resize it. Do put it where it's supposed to go, and boom, that's where the RVs go, so that's nice. And we'll try the other parts like the house. So let me call this RV location. And put in another mesh part, or select this and Control D to duplicate, and now change the name of this after we've put something in. And I think we're going to put in Bishop House, and click on this and go to the Bishop House, which we made instead. It was the Rosebud House and Classroom, those ones there with the colors that we made. Put them in, don't resize it, and move it to the location, and bingo, in it comes, although without its color information. And so you can see everything is beginning to line up where it ought to be, except that there's no terrain underneath that. We can take that Bishop House and hit Control D and duplicate that, but now change this version of it, because there's that one that's in the right location. There's the one I just moved. Change the name of this to, try to get that lake in again, and see if it actually comes in. Maybe it's too big a mesh, we don't know. So Lake Rosebud, right there. Don't resize it, move it. And it didn't like it. Sometimes the problem is the names, because it doesn't like certain names, although I doubt that. Let's see if we re-export. Sometimes it could be the mesh, because this mesh is so meshy. So what happens if, because of the number of segments that we had, and if we go to Edit and we go to Faces, there's so many faces. The idea would be to merge all these faces, and I'm not sure how one does that. Let me pause. So one thing we can do is we can select a bunch of faces and see if we can merge them by hitting the F key. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If I hit this face and this face, I merge them. If I hit this face and this face, but they don't all merge at the same time. So there's a big mess on this for the lake. Another thing that we might try doing is to, maybe it didn't have enough depth. It does seem to have some depth though. We can try to do a decimator, because it may have, it has too many triangles, it seems. It's got to have less than 10,000 triangles. Down here you can see the number of triangles. So if I simplify it, I can only bring it down to 13,100. If I turn off everything else, let's see, it is the Google satellite map. Turn that off and open up the lake again, and then we're at 5,000 triangles. Let's try that. One moment. So if I decimate this object and then apply that modifier, that may make things somewhat simpler. And now I'm going to export that wavefront object, and I'm going to do it as Lake Rosebud 2 again, and export it, and see what happens now when I bring in Lake Rosebud 2. There it is there. Don't resize the mesh. Yes, let it go to its location, and it still didn't do anything. There was another lake that I did earlier, this object here. It seemed to work. maybe I didn't put as many meshes in it. Don't resize the mesh and move it to its location. Yeah, that one came in. So it's something to do with the number of polygons that I had in there. So the lake is in and the digesters are in. Now, what does that mean for our character? Well, each of these parts has to be anchored. So I'm going to hit anchor so it doesn't fall out of the sky. This part has to be anchored. This part has to be anchored. This has to be anchor on. The biodigesters need to be, if I can select them, anchored. The RV space needs to be anchored. Assuming everything's anchored, when I hit play here, play and do the project. Huh. That's weird. Is that some bug? Because my character's walking around, but I don't know what that's about. This wipeouts. That is super weird. That's not supposed to happen. Rotec base. This must be this Rotec animation thing I installed is active. That must be the problem. So I'm going to turn that off, get rid of that plugin, and hope that that takes care of this weird Rotec base thing, because I'm not sure what that's about. So let me try it again. There we go. Okay, so now my character's in, and he can go onto the basketball court. He can run over to the bishop's house. He can go all the way up to where the RV belongs. He can see the digesters. The problem is that he'll fall off the edge of the world and die. And then he'll have to respawn. Boom, right there. So we have some issues for sure, but we have at least the right sizing of the landscape of everything now for a Roblox character. And that's the point of this, is that we can keep building in assets. So for example, if we go back to our landscape here and we go to the Rosebud satellite image, that one there, then we can continue to develop pieces of the landscape that we can put in to the map. A good example might be a road here, and so if I go to add and I add a simple plane again, and I call this driveway, and find that driveway and move it down to the beginning of the driveway here, and make sure that the driveway is, let's go to our tools here. So we have that beginning of a driveway as a plane, and we will rock you. There it is. No, it's not. I'm looking for the place where we put its height of the driveway. Isn't that interesting? There it is. This one here, which is the context, and we'll bring it up a little bit. We said about 5 meters generally makes it show up better. Yep. And once again with this, we can go into, the first thing you can do is stay in object mode and scale it out so that it's as big as we need it to be. And then we can go to the edit mode, as we've been doing, and select these points down here by going into point mode. See, there's point and line and face, and we can select these 2 points and then grow them out as far as it will go straight. And when it's no longer straight, so you can do this thing where you, when you get to this point here, you can rotate it slightly and continue to pull it down. And of course here there's a bump in the road because the ground is uneven. So what I'm going to do is raise it up a little bit, and then you hit E for extrude. Oh, you know what? Let me turn on screencast keys again. It keeps going off. I should be able to see it. And then when you extrude it, it should extrude. The problem is, of course, the bumps in the road. So we will come over this way and use a side view. No. I have to still use a perspective view of some kind. And it's a little tricky, but now when I extrude, I can extrude up to a certain point. And then I can hit E again to extrude, but it does appear as if the whole thing, let me go back to object mode, needs to be raised up a bit so we don't run into that problem. And now go back into edit with tab and extrude. Well, that is a real problem, isn't it? What if we do our extrusion in X? That would go along that way. If we did an extrusion in Y, then it goes down. And rotate it again a little bit more. This is looking really funky. And extrude. So everything just seems to be going underground with this. Maybe I'm going to try to do the whole thing way up high. And go back to edit. And here's where you can use the face mode and bring things down a bit. This face here I'm going to delete and redo this. Go back to edit, take it from a top view and bring it over top orthographic, bring it over, and we'll bring it down later as we edit and grab these points and hit extrude and come down that way and hit extrude, and this should be curved a little bit, maybe just a bit of a curve, and then extrude it out and keep going like this, but staying in the top view, and bring it, curve it a little bit more, extrude and grab, oops, extrude, bring it down like this, curve it a bit, extrude, curve it, extrude, curve it with the R, extrude, and extrude. Again, we need to curve it a bit and extrude, and that makes that path, and then we can bring it down onto the landscape. So we have our driveway, and we have to give it some dimension just as we had done before. So go back into edit, do the faces, select all, and extrude in Z, and give it just a little bit of dimension like that. So now we have an object that can be, let me match it up a little bit better. That object can now be exported from this landscape as a wavefront object, and we'll call it driveway Rosebud 2, and come back into Roblox here and create a mesh part, or simply take one of these and Control D, duplicate it, give it the name, which in this case is going to be driveway Rosebud. Come down and replace the ID with the driveway Rosebud, that one there, and don't resize the mesh, but put it in its location, and boom! Now that is where it's supposed to be in the world. And we're going to have to put some way, a bridge to get here, because the character won't be able to get there without falling through the world. So you are supposed to be able to come to regions here, and if we create a region like that, and we move the region forward and move it down to the right place, then technically we should have, assuming I've put it the right level, then when I go to fill and come down to this grass, there we have a region that we can actually walk on, and we should be able to connect the rest of Rosebud this way too. Put in another region, and there it is there. So we can get to the lake. Oops, that's a mess. Control Z. Oh, no, 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 no. How do we redo? There we go, redo, and redo. Go ahead to region again. There we are. It is a big pain. That region in there. We'll figure this out eventually, but we're going to hit fill, and we are going to fill it with leafy grass, if it will let us. I can do move, bring it down, bring it over, still way up in the air. That's where it meets. Okay, and resize it as best we can. Move it so it's just touching that region. Let's move it that way so we don't fall through the house when we're there. And now let us fill it with some leafy grass and say okay. Alright, let's save this, and we'll call this Roblox, Rosebud for Roblox, and let's give it a try and see what happens. Now boom, the character goes down there, he can run by the house. And now there is the driveway, which is way up in the air. Funky driveway. Weird. But at least now, if I'm careful, I can walk out into the space and not fall off. So it looks weird, it's funky, but it does give you the idea of getting to Rosebud and to getting to the lake. So we're beginning to get objects in and sizes in that are correct for Roblox, and then we're going to have to replace all of these with actual meshes of things, but we know where to put them now. So an example might be, if I stop the game, that we do know that here in Rosebud, right next to the basketball court, if you actually look at the map here in Google, you see that we have our solar panels that are lying over there. And I don't have to get them exact, but I can, which is really nice. I can go to my models and I can search for solar, and there actually are some solar panels, but I need to put solar panels. And there they are. So there are solar panels, some on mounts, some not on mounts, that we can put into the game. And my kind of panels are these kind of panels here. So when I click on them, I can place them and move them with the move tool, and go over to my top view and move it down this way. Whoops, that's the wrong way. Bring them up and move it back. So it has to rotate, I think, a bit. But if we rotate it, then, oh, that's the bad way of rotating it. There we go. And stands are maybe here, is it that? So they have some solar panels that can be put in the game, and then we can Control D and duplicate those. Somewhere in here, solar panels, those. And duplicate it again. And duplicate those. So now we have some solar panels that are in the game. We also know that at Rosebud we have a windmill set up near the second digester. This, by the way, is a bit low. There we go. So near there we have a windmill, so we can type in windmill. And they have a big windmill and a little windmill. Let's try to bring this one in here. It's huge, way too big. So we'll scale this down by holding the Shift key and bring that thing way down. And continue to bring it down if it'll let us. It may be that it's not letting us because it's touching the ground. Sometimes there's collision that you have to worry about. So move it up in the air and then bring it down in scale if it'll let us. Why is it not letting us? Maybe again it's still too maybe it needs to be way up in the air before we can do it. So there it is up there. Now scale it and it won't let us bring it down. So it seems to have a constraint about just how small this windmill can be. So I'm going to get rid of this windmill because it is causing me a problem. Let's try this. Is a working windmill. This is huger. Will it let us scale it down? Don't know until we try. Okay, that one can be made nice and small. Alright, so we'll make it a bit bigger. We'll move it next to the digester where it is in real life. And because it's too short as it is now, we'll scale it, and this time we won't hold the Shift key down. We'll just try to size it up. Well, it doesn't size non-uniformly. Okay, so we'll just have it in for the moment because it's pool that way. We'd have to do our own mesh if we want to make it really work well. But we'll put it there. And it says it's a working windmill. So we'll put that there. And since we have that now, we will save this. And we will play. And now you can see that although things are really messed up in terms of height, there's the working windmill right there. Biodigester needs to be brought down, obviously, as do the solar panels, which are in the game here. So there's some things to be done, but things are becoming playable now. And we'll bring this down in move, drag it so that they're on the ground. It's a little hard to tell, but should be. And the same thing with the solar panels. Somehow they're not even selectable. Weird. So bring them down to the ground level. And it looks like you can only select them right now from here. And I can't account for that, but that's life in the fast lane of programming with Roblox. So at least now when we hit play, panels should be on the ground. They're a little better, but they're not perfect, but they are lower. And they're wacky. But yeah, there's that, the windmill turning and the digester. So it's suggestive of things we can begin to do to get our own landscapes into Roblox. And we'll work on other better techniques as we go along, but this is a start. All right, so happy trails. Bringing your own house into Roblox. Oh yeah, one last thing I want to show. So I've got this, stop the game a sec. I got this placeholder for the driveway, and that's fun. But we don't have to use that, actually. We can bring this up, or bring it down. As long as we know where this is, what we can do is go to Paint and pick asphalt or gravel or slate. I don't know if they have gravel. Slate, rock, sand, water, ground. Ground may work. And choose your brush size. Let's make it a bit smaller. And you can begin to paint the ground under here. So we have a basic path there, and then when we select this mesh of the driveway and go to move, oh, it didn't do a darn thing. Let me try it again. Paint with ground. Strength. Ah, there we go. So ground isn't the best. Let's pick an actual, let's pick asphalt. Yeah. And paint over this. So this gives us the asphalt there. And we can also come in here and pick sand and come over to where we have the sand pit and paint that. As you can see, it's painting underneath it. So we get an idea of where that is, and let's use not mud, leafy grass, asphalt, ground. I guess there's not a lot of different stuff that you can use here, so maybe we'll put slate. We can change it later, but for the basketball court, and for the RV area, we because these were just placeholders. And then what we can do for the lake is we can go to water, and unfortunately there's not any under here. There's no, you can see what I'm painting here. Water is supposed to come in here, but we don't have any other terrain to paint on because we haven't built the terrain yet. But we can start by putting some water in here, and then what we have the ability to do is to bring this down, and you see that there's water contours there. It looks like we didn't get those. Let me go back to paint and get the water and make the size of the brush a little bit bigger, and come in and paint a bit of water on there, if it will allow me. Paint the water there and move this down. Well, it's still, so it's really hard to get in there and paint this stuff because this is in the way, and since this isn't transparent we can't really see it. Maybe the same thing happened here. Yeah, it didn't quite paint underneath, but I can move these objects now out of the way so that when we're playing the game, and let me move this one out of the way as well, we do have to finish doing that one with paint and with the asphalt. Make my brush a little bit smaller. So that's our driveway. And what that lets us do is come in and have the terrain be visible. And the other thing I can do here is I can move this house down, and I can bring in an actual house, but it won't be our house. We have to model that. But if I type house in, then I can put in a gorgeous suburban house, for example, and place it right here where the property would be. Rotate it around, zoom in on it. Takes up a lot of memory, so that's the problem with this. But it's kind of in the place, if I can get it to fit in here, it kind of goes crazy with every little movement. So I'm replacing my object with this one, and then Bishop House, which is there, I can kind of bury so it can't be seen, and I've replaced it with a house. And now when I hit play, you will see, now that house I didn't put all the way down, it's way too high, so I need to go back in and move it down. Oops, not that one. Move the house here down. I think I just buried the house. I did. So you have to play around to get it just right. It's so delicate. But let's try that, and let's hit, although it's facing the wrong direction. Well, it's not even the real house, so it doesn't matter much there. Till we get the right house in, the point is that now there's where the basketball court is, that's where the volleyball court is. I'll have to finish painting that. The windmill's turning there, and the house is over here. Now these houses are quite well designed. There's a lot of functionality in these houses, which is so cool. So you can bring in very complex models. You can even sit on the toilet, and then he can get up and he can flush the toilet, and the flushing works. You can go in and you can turn on the sinks. Sometimes the animations play, sometimes they don't. The lights go on and off. So there's a lot that you can do in these meshes, going up the stairs. So if we do detailed modeling, then we can put all this stuff in. And there's the driveway going out there. And then of course there's the other driveway that I moved down there at the end of the world. And when we come back to the lake, there's some of the water that I put in that you can swim in. So there's definitely possibilities here for really modeling Rosebud. And then of course you fall off the edge of the world. But here's where I put the other part of the lake, and that's part of the problem there. And then you fall through the world and you die. Okay, so that gives an idea of how we can build the game. You know, it's all the different stuff that you can put in, windmills, there's cars. The cars actually do drive. So if I bring this in now, as we showed, the car is the right size relative to the driveway. And if our character wants to drive a car, now when we hit play, the character can, keeps making me purchase the house. We can go up to the car and we can get in the car, start the engine, and drive around the property. Back to where our RV is. Boom. That's cool. And there should be an RV in here. Let's see if they have an RV. Yeah, they sure do. Now we'll try to pick one that's close to what ours is. That's an RV truck. That's an RV. Maybe they have it as fifth wheel. Doubt it. That's what we actually own. They kind of do. Fifth wheel camper. It's not a great one. Let's see. RV trailer. Various models. None of them quite like ours. Perhaps the best is the fifth wheel trailer. This one here is not too bad. CF Motors RV trailer. So we can put this in. It's got an open top for some reason. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe we'll take that out. Delete that. Let's just see what the fifth wheel would look like. And there it is, the fifth wheel camper. Yeah, it looks okay. And the fifth wheel camper in our landscape, if I go to the top, is located move it over there, and then now of course because of the slope of the landscape it disappears, but that is where we have the fifth wheel over there, and we'll rotate it, zoom in on it by hitting F, and rotate it around. If it'll let me. Which way is the front? I think that way. Or is it that way? Let's see. It's backwards. Okay. Nope, that was the right way. Okay, so there it is. And we'll move it and place it where it belongs. Get it down on the ground, put it in place there. It's a little too high. That should work. Alright, so now let me save this. Takes a few seconds. So now that we're back in the game, we go to this horribly fallen RV and climb up it. No, is there a way in? Or does this model not give us any doors? Oh, yes it does. Okay, there we are inside the RV, and it doesn't look exactly like the inside of our RV, but there it is, and the bedroom is definitely in the front, if the door would even open. Oh, there it is. Okay. And there's a bed, and then we have the bathroom. So it is a little bit like RV, it's just a slightly different layout, shower and all that. In fact, I wonder if the shower works. Yep, click on water, click on the hot water, turn them off. That's just a static animation, it's not as fancy as some. And the toilet doesn't work. Okay. The light may work. Nope. It says it clicks, but it doesn't. That's par for the course when you have an RV that has solar power when it's cloudy. No lights. And of course the sunken living room is literally sunken. That water turns on. That water turns on. Ah, okay. And sometimes drawers open, but not here. But, yeah, there's a problem with this in that it is a little misaligned, so we'll have to hit F to zoom in on it and turn around and get it to work on the landscape by hitting rotate. And let's rotate this. Yeah, let's get it upright, for crying out loud. There we go. And hit play. Take that free house and go over to the RV. Much better now, although maybe leaning a little bit too far to the front. But yeah, boom, we're inside the RV. It's a little bit better. And the lights do work. Ooh, fancy lights. And the stove may or may not work. The microwave may or may not work. Ah, look at that. Okay, well that's a great way to end it because it does have a gas stove, and we'll say it's a biogas stove. Hey, very good. And we'll get back with you later on. So hooray with that. Yep, all cooking on all burners, so to speak. Lovely. Absolutely lovely. Bye for now. So very quickly, I just want to show how I got something approximating a landscape in, so that we have a basic idea. What I did is I came out to Blender, and we were in layout, and I took the landscape, and let me show here, if I turn on everything here. So I had this satellite map somewhere here, yeah, which has the digital elevation information, and I realized I didn't want that for mapping the thing on, so I duplicated this and created another layer which I called Google Satellite Landscape Picture, which is just a flat layer the same dimension. And so that flat plane, if I turn everything else off, was really just a plane the size of the image, and I made that have a little bit of dimension by going into tab and, you know, using my extrusion that I showed in another video. So it has a little bit of depth to it. And then I went to UV editing and selected it, and here was the image. And I went to image and I did save as, and I saved that TIFF file. And then I went online to this image converter and I loaded the file and converted it to a PNG and then downloaded it. And then what I did is I came into Roblox Studio and I imported that as a plane by making a mesh part, which is what we've done before, and then assigning the mesh part to that, let me make this big, assigning that mesh part to that image, which was the TIFF image, which was there. Oh, as an object, right, as an object. So I imported that as an object and that I had exported as an OBJ, but it didn't take the texture. So then I created a decal, and to do that, all I did is I went to images and I dropped onto this, any image, the image of a sword, for example, by dropping that decal, and I can take this decal out so you can see. So there was a decal of a sword. So that was on the landscape. Then I went to the decal and I went to texture and I loaded this image of Rosebud landscape. And that did it. That's by loading that texture. There it is, boom. And that came in, but it didn't come in perfectly. The size is kind of okay, but kind of not. It's actually too small, and I don't really know how to deal with that. But I do know that now when I go to play the game, it does play, and what it looks like is, once he drops in, it looks like this. So yeah, I'm on my texture and I can go to the RV and I can go inside after banging on the door and go up to the room and open the doors, different functionality built in. So hooray for that. And yeah, you know, it's got some functionality sitting in the chair. If I can get out of the chair, it has that wonderful stove that we looked at before. It's got running water. So this is all that stuff that came from Roblox assets. You can even open the refrigerator. Little do they know that this is actually a gas-powered refrigerator. And I guess it even has a false fireplace. How pretty. Our RV has one of those too. So there's that, and the light switches, boom, LED lights, super bright. So going back out, I put some cows in. They don't move. They move. They don't move. The solar panels still have to be readjusted. So there's that. I put the volleyball court in, and I put in the basketball court, and I put the windmill and the 3 biodigesters. I put a goat pen, yay, with the 5 goats, and the car, and a false house, which, as you can see, is quite complex. It's got wonderful stuff in it, including particle effects. But it's not really the bishop's house. But it's a very nice house. So I have that in there. It's got all sorts of rooms in it to explore. Washing machine room. That's pretty cool. Although these handles don't seem to work. Okay, and then back out. And I even put in the lake as much as I could by painting a water texture on it. At the edge of the world, you fall through and there's a whole lot of nothing. So that's inconvenient. So we leave the game. But even if I hit play here, I'll have to re-export this with a new texture. This object becomes a surface that can be moved upon. So when we zoom out, that landscape, oh, I see what's happening. It's fallen off the world because I didn't anchor it. So it's doing this weird jittering and then we fall out. So you've got to make sure with a landscape like that, that if it doesn't have a collision, then when you click on it, you've got to click on anchor. And now it should do a lot better now that it's anchored. So if I go to the edge of the world, it's still a bit far down there, but now we're sort of on a Google map going down Collier Parkway, which, as I say, is not perfectly situated. It's not the right size, so we still have to work on that. But what's nice is there is a bit of landscape to work with, although, as I say, it's not completely perfect for the lake. But it gives us an idea of where we are in space and time, and that is nice. And when I publish this to Roblox, then if we go to the game Roblox itself, it should, anybody in the world should be able to get on and experience what I just experienced. And then we'll try to work from there to make it better. So that's the drill. That's what we're trying to achieve, is a way to be able to take place and start populating it properly. Oh, the car hasn't even loaded yet. But there's the landscape. And so now, when we go to the lake, he can't even swim because there's no depth information there. So it is loading. So yeah, it's pretty cool that now we are beginning to get our place in the world onto the map. And so we can begin to add sustainability assets for real places now, and put in functioning things like this incredible windmill and get the real biodigesters and solar panels in. Alrighty, so yay, hooray, good fun. Thanks for watching.